It's time that we talk about some major Turo news. And not only what the news is, but how I'm dealing with it and how you possibly can as well. I've recorded this video now 3 separate times. The most recent time had to be scrapped because whenever I was in the process of editing the video, Turo released a new policy that affected the topic of this video. And so here I am for the 3rd time. And if you are a seasoned Turo host, or you're just a Turo host at all, you probably know exactly what topic I'm going to talk about today, and that is reviews. Over the last couple of months, Turo has drastically changed how they handle reviews and the impact that a review will have on a Turo host. You see, in recent years, Turo hosts could get retaliatory reviews removed from their Turo profile. And what a retaliatory review has been classified as a guest leaving a review in retaliation of something that a host did. For example, it could be something as black, white, and straightforward as you requesting something like a gas or mileage fee, and then that guest leaving you a 1 or 2 star review, and then in that review stating, "This host charged me a gas fee." That's very black and white retaliation. That guest left you that review because of the fee that you charged. Retaliatory reviews could also be things with more nuance, like a guest leaving a 2-star no comment review shortly after a fee was charged, or leaving a poor review after a damage claim but not actually mentioning the damage claim in the review. The point is, Turo in the past has been pretty good at reading between the lines and figuring out when a review is and is not retaliatory. And when applicable and appropriate, they were pretty good and fair about getting reviews removed. Now, it is important to note, and many new Turo hosts probably won't know this, but this actually wasn't always the case. In the early years of my Turo career at least, Turo didn't allow for reviews to be removed from profiles. But then maybe in 2020, I'm not exactly sure the exact year, Turo changed this policy and began to let hosts get retaliatory reviews removed. But then in the last year or so, Turo has once again pivoted this policy. And now, pretty much unless a guest explicitly says, "I am leaving this review in retaliation of X, Y, and Z," you aren't getting a review removed because of retaliation. Pretty much end of story. Which is extremely frustrating as a host because there are scenarios where a guest leaves poor reviews that are definitely retaliatory, but because the guest didn't leave written feedback, which is something that Turo doesn't require in a review, but they absolutely should, Turo doesn't take these reviews down. We've had instances over the last year where a guest steals or wrecks a car and then leaves us a 1-star and Turo won't take it down. Last week even, we had a guest who we charged for gas and he was super pissed off about it. He sent us a bunch of scathing messages in the Turo app, but because of the fact that his 1-star review didn't have commentary with it, Turo wouldn't deem it retaliatory, even though it absolutely was, and we had plenty of evidence to prove it. But because that evidence wasn't in the form of commentary on the actual review itself, Turo wouldn't get that removed either. And while these are just 2 examples of my specific fleet, I have much more that I've seen over the last year, and there are tons more that other Turo hosts have had as well. It is extremely frustrating. And the logic for Turo for this decision is that reviews are important, and that we shouldn't be watering down the meaning of reviews by taking away ones that we deem retaliatory when they may not be, and that the experience of any guest is ones that should be noted in the form of a review. But I don't disagree with this, and I do think that taking away too many reviews does affect the integrity of the Turo platform. But reviews aren't all created equal, and just as though you're watering down the value of a review by taking away a bunch of them, you are also watering down reviews by allowing a bunch of invalid ones to stay. Because the reality is, and Turo doesn't want to accept this, that not all reviews are created equal. A review from a real guest who had a real experience, whether that experience was negative or positive, should not hold the same weight as a review from a guest who stole a car, wrecked a car, smoked in a car, just violated the terms of service. But under Turo's current policy, these 2 types of customers and these 2 types of reviews hold the same weight. And that's not right either. Because the reality is that reviews are only helpful if reviews are legitimate. And while I will admit that Turo probably did allow for too many reviews to get deleted under the retaliatory review policy, I also feel very adamant with the fact that they have gone now too far in the opposite direction, and they're allowing too many reviews to stay published on the platform that really shouldn't be. And it's rewarding bad guests, and it's absolutely punishing good hosts. Because now hosts are very literally having to decide, okay, do I want to charge this gas fee and risk getting a 1-star, or do I just want to let it slide? But here is where things get even worse. Turo recently changed their all-star host requirements, which essentially changes the power host requirements. Now, all-star host on Turo is a metric by Turo that hosts can reach by getting good reviews, having good quality cars, and creating a good guest experience. Now, historically speaking, All-Star Host has been relatively meaningless, and it's also been pretty easy to get. But Power Host is a second tier of designation for Turo hosts, which is better than All-Star Host, and it has a lot more benefits for a Turo host. In order to qualify for Power Host, not only do you have to have a certain number of vehicles, but you also have to have a certain revenue figure, and you have to be an All-Star Host. And so even though All-Star Host and Power Host are separate with two different sets of requirements, in order to become a Power Host, you have to first become an All-Star Host. So they are intertwined together. And last week, Turo announced that they are making it much, much harder to reach All-Star Host status. And they're doing this by changing the metrics that you have to reach in order to get this designation. And now, under the new requirements for All-Star Hosts, in order to reach this host status, you have to reach 85% overall 5-star ratings for all completed trips, at least an 80% 5-star maintenance ratings for all completed trips, at least an 80% 5-star cleanliness ratings for all completed trips, 3% or lower cancellation rate, and 20+ trips completed. Now, there are many issues that Turo hosts have with this new policy, but the one that people are kind of most up in arms about is the fact that now Turo is taking into account all completed trips with host metrics, not just all rated trips. Previously, under the old all-star host criteria, you had to get 90% 5-star trips or more for rated trips. So Turo would only take into account the trips that were rated. But now, with this new all-star host requirements, Turo is requiring you to have 85% or more 5-star reviews for all completed trips, unrated ones included. So this now means that if a guest does not rate you, that actually counts against you, and they may as well be giving you a bad star. And under this new policy, pretty much anything that isn't a 5-star is considered poor. There's also been pushback on other metrics like the 80% maintenance rating, which people are upset with because many guests just don't understand maintenance on vehicles and equate the tiniest noise as a maintenance problem. But the real pushback is coming from the 85% 5-star rating requirement for all completed trips. Now, the good news is that come October 1st, all hosts will start with a clean slate. So they'll have the chance to start fresh and kind of build up their ratings from October moving forward. And the new Power Host standing will begin in January, which is good news that we do have some time to prepare for this new change to go into effect. But the bad news is that come January, there will no doubt be a ton of hosts that lose their Power Host status, potentially myself included. As of today, if Turo was to make this change effective, like as of me recording this video, I would lose my Power Host status because I wouldn't qualify as an all-star host because I have 76% 5-star rated trips and 17% unrated trips. I don't meet that 85% threshold, so as of today, I wouldn't qualify. Now, it goes without saying that I am absolutely going to pivot my process to try to meet this new metric, which we will talk about here shortly. But I know of a lot of very well-respected Turo hosts that are not only well-respected in the Turo community, but also have very large, successful fleets that also won't qualify for this either. Which really goes to show that not only is this policy really hurting large hosts particularly, but it really goes to show how hard this is to reach. Because I've been a well-respected power host for years and years and years, and if this policy was to go into effect in October, I would lose the status. Now, I've been asked by a few people what my thoughts are on this new policy, and I'm not gonna lie, the truth is I'm frustrated. It feels like a bit of a betrayal to have Turo make it harder and harder to get good reviews, and then at the same time increase the importance of these same reviews. And I've heard a lot of chatter online, and there are a lot of hosts, myself included, that feel that the idea of making Power Host and All-Star Host harder to get is actually an idea that we can get behind. This status was far too easy to get, but I think that there are other ways to do it that were more in control of the host. Because whether a guest gets a good experience or a bad experience, that's something that I'm in control of. If I screw up, then I deserve a bad review. But whether a guest reviews or not, that's not really something that's in my control. And while Turo says that the majority of their guests that don't review do so because they have a bad experience, I disagree with this. I think a lot of people don't download the app, they get annoyed about all the Turo notifications, they don't review because a lot of people don't review if they have a good experience. I just think Turo's wrong on that. But it really isn't in the control of the host of whether or not a guest reviews the trip, because we can only ask them to review so much before we're going to piss them off. But to be honest, and I've said this in other videos, I'm not one to dwell or stress about things that I can't control. I don't think that Turo is going to change this policy anytime soon. Maybe they will in the future, but I don't think that they will in the short term, and so I'm not going to be overly stressed about it. I'm going to worry about what I can control, so in the short term, I am no doubt going to be changing my messaging and my process to get better reviews, or at least try to. But in the end, I'm hoping that maybe this new policy will surprise me. For example, dynamic pricing was another policy change that Turo recently made that a lot of people were upset about. And while I wasn't necessarily upset, I didn't really understand why they were implementing this. And I have found that in the first month of dynamic pricing, I've actually been making more money per car. So I've been pleasantly surprised with dynamic pricing, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I can be pleasantly surprised with this one too. But while I'll be crossing my fingers, I certainly won't be holding my breath. So now the question is, what does this mean for Turo, and what am I going to be doing now that this change is going into effect? Now, I do an annual video where I break down what the current state of Turo is and whether or not the current year is still a good year for Turo. I've been doing this series since 2020, and I do have this plan coming very soon where I'll break down whether or not Turo is a good investment for 2025. And even though I am no doubt frustrated with this change, overall, I am still pro Turo. I think that this policy will end up pushing hosts out, and I think that of the hosts that can survive it, which I have no doubt that I can, I think they will ultimately end up doing better long term. But I'll address more of that and my thought process with it in that video that I just mentioned, which should be coming out in a couple of weeks. So now the question is, how am I going to deal with this change? First is I am no doubt going to be more picky with the reviews that I give my guests. Historically speaking, I give 5 stars out to guests like candy. A guest would have to do really something egregious to get me to give them something below like a 5 or a 4-star rating. But as Turo has made their review policy more strict, I've become more strict with my own. Because if a guest is going to leave me a 3 or a 4-star rating, I don't want them booking from me again. In fact, this happens somewhat frequently, where a guest will rent one of our cars, they'll say that it was a great experience, but then they leave us 4 stars. And then a couple weeks later, they rent from us again, and they leave us 4 stars again. These are guests that whenever I notice them, I give them 3 or 2 stars to prevent them from booking from us in the future. Because I am no longer going to accept these guests that are going to give us anything other than a 5-star. And if you give somebody something like a 2-star rating, they can't book from you again. So we are absolutely going to be more picky with our guests moving forward. Next is I'm going to be changing my messaging flow to my guests. Not only am I changing the tone, but I'm also going to be more aggressive with the way that I ask for a review. We're currently testing some new messages, and we'll be releasing the most effective messaging templates to the course members of the Car Sharing Masterclass. And lastly, we are experimenting and brainstorming with some cost-effective ways to add some extra oomph into our rentals. We're in a tricky position because we rent out low and economy cars, so our cars are very, very cheap, and after Turo takes their cut, we're making maybe $20 to $35 per car per day. So I am not super interested in giving like a gift to my guest, which I've heard of other Turo hosts doing, but how can we include something that's relatively low cost but still goes a long way? We're thinking probably beginning including aux cables or charging cords, something that we can buy in bulk for cheap from like Amazon or eBay. But I'll keep you guys posted on what we decide because we're going to be testing and playing around with that as well. Overall, I think it's too soon to tell how this change will really affect me and other hosts, and I really don't think that we'll know until probably mid-2025 because this change doesn't go into effect until January, and I think that the people affected by it really won't feel the brunt of it until a couple of months later. And I also think starting out, I think more hosts will have this all-star and power host rating, and then as time goes on, people will fall out of it. But I will no doubt keep you guys posted on not only how this change is affecting me as a fleet owner, but what I hear from other hosts and how I think that this affects Turo's viability in the future. But like always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.